Hey guys, long time no see. Let's kick the week off with another Shop My Stash video, because I would really just like to chit chat with you to get a bit in the swing of things. So let's start off with our base product. I am going to once again be using my Mcgrath Lab Skin Fetish Sublime Perfection foundation, because I haven't been using this foundation much since I bought it. It's a shade too light for me, and I found out in my previous Shop My Stash that it actually fits me really well now that I'm quite winter pale. So I want to use this foundation a little bit more now that I can. On that note, I also want to be working on kind of panning this concealer. This is my Instant Concealer from Clarins. It's a really beautiful formula, very lightweight, good coverage, but it is once again quite light in tone, and I would like to finish it up now that it still works for me really well. Another product that I would like to work on a little bit more, because I don't really experience a lot of joy when using it, is the Mcgrath Labs. What is this again? The Skin Fetish Sublime Perfecting Setting Powder in the shade Light 1. Don't get me wrong, the actual powder is really good. It's a very good smoothing powder. It's very lightweight on the skin. It really blurs your pores. I just don't really like loose powders. It takes me forever to go through them. I think they're super messy. So let's just work on this one together, shall we? Then for my bronzer, you are seeing once again the Butter Bronzer from Physicians Formula. Like I said, you're going to see this bronzer a lot, because I think I would really like to work on panning it this year, and Shop My Stash is the perfect setup for that. For my blush today, I have chosen... Okay, this is a bit misleading. It's not a MAC blush. It's actually a Makeup Geek blush that I rehomed in this really beautiful packaging from MAC, because I didn't like the original blush that was housed in here. This is the shade Romance from Makeup Geek. It is a beautiful, like, peachy pink with a golden sheen to it. It's a pretty classic blush, really nice color, really lovely formula, and I would really like to get more use out of it, especially now that I experience so much joy when I look at the gorgeous packaging that it is housed in. For my highlighter, I want to use a product that is very new to my collection. This is the Mcgrath Divine Rose Highlighter. It's not exactly a Shop My Stash, like a classical Shop My Stash product, but because I've been sick, I'll tell you in a little bit, but because I've been sick, I haven't really had the chance to use it much last week, and I just got it, and I would like to just experience again the beautiful formula on my skin. So I am going to pick up this highlighter for today. Then for my eyes, I am going to be taking the beautiful Juvia's Place Tribe palette. This is my second favorite Juvia's Place palette. Look at these beautiful, deep, rich orange and green colors. Definitely going for a green look today, but I haven't used this eyeshadow palette in such a long time. I can't even tell you whether last year I picked it up at all. So shame on me, we have to correct that. I'm going to use it today. A product that I used to use a lot, like a whole lot, is the Urban Decay Heavy Metal Glitter Liners, and in particular this shade. This is the shade Midnight Cowboy, which is like the champagne gold glitter. I used to use these on the regular all the time before I got into Mcgrath's special formula shades, because I used to use these as like little accents on my lid or like my inner corners, and since I used Mcgrath, I haven't really touched these. So I thought today might be a great time to dig into Midnight Cowboy again. I really love the formula on these. As you can see, this is still liquid. It hasn't dried out, and I've had it for at least 3 or 4 years. I really recommend these if you want a nice touch of glitter, because they're super easy to work with, they're super long lasting, and just overall a really great formula from Urban Decay. And for my lips, I'm going to do a little bit of mixy. I'm going to use this lipstick from Urban Decay from their Naked Heat collection. This is the shade Fuel. It is a beautiful, like, peachy nude shade. I think over top of that I want to use another peachy lipstick, but more like a light pastel peach. This is from Suku. It's one of their, what's this one? Extra Glow formula lipsticks. This is the shade 01, which is once again a nude peach. I think the two are going to make a really lovely creamy combination on my lips for the day. And those are all the products that we're going to be focusing on today. I'll see you in a little bit for the look. Okay, you guys, so let's get into the look and chat a little bit. I find like chatty get ready with me to be the easiest way to get back into YouTube after a while of not doing it, because for me it always feels extra awkward when I have to talk to the camera after I haven't done it for a really long time. I disappeared a little bit last week, like for the last 10 days or so, because I got really sick last week. Nothing too serious, just like a stomach virus. but I don't know, like stomach viruses tend to like fuck me up for a really long time. Like the overt phase of the disease goes away really quickly, like within a day or two I like visibly feel better, but my digestive tract continues to be disturbed for a really long time after that. Like it's been almost a week since and I still don't really feel completely recovered. So anyway, I don't want to really focus too much on being sick. I just wanted to let you know where I've been and just chat with you. How have you been doing? What's up? What's new? What's cracking? I wanted to chat with you today about watching a documentary on TV last week and ask you whether you watched the documentary, what you thought of it, and yeah, just chat about this whole situation because it's a really interesting situation, but a little bit of a bummer, I'm gonna warn you. So the documentary that I'm referring to is one that has been really famous and has been covered a lot on the news lately. It is the Framing Britney Spears documentary. If you guys were not aware of that, just let me quickly tell you. The New York Times made a documentary called Framing Britney Spears, and from what I understand, originally it was not even supposed to be about Britney. It was supposed to be about media coverage of like celebrities in the early 2000s, late 90s, because that was a thing of its own to comment on. But while they were researching the topic, they naturally landed on the celebrity whom it had the biggest impact on. Now, since I've already shown you the products which I'm going to use for today, I'm not really going to tell you what I'm putting on my face. We're just going to chat so that I don't interrupt my stream of thoughts too much. But yeah, there's so much to say about this documentary, and I'm not even sure that I can do the topic proper justice, but I just wanted to talk about it because I grew up with Britney Spears. She was my queen in the 90s and early 2000s, and watching this documentary really bummed me out, I can tell you. And I've been watching like a lot of like interviews and performances of hers since I watched the documentary, and that's been bumming me out even more. But for those of you who might not know exactly what is going on and what the documentary is about, I'm just going to try to recap a little bit. Like, they basically wanted to tell how Britney was portrayed in the media during the 90s and early 2000s, how that affected her and how it disproportionately affected women more than men. Like, women and men were represented very differently in media, and probably still are. We can circle to that later. A few things that you might not have been aware of if you haven't really followed what's going on with Britney over the years, because I checked out back in 2007 or 8 when she had her mental breakdown. If you guys remember, circa between 2006 and 2008, Britney had a huge public meltdown. She shaved her head, she married someone from her high school that she annulled 24 hours later. Then she married really quickly to this, what I consider opportunist backup dancer. She had really quickly 2 babies, like back-to-back 2 babies. And then she ended up hospitalized for psychological problems. And since then, I kind of stopped following her and her career because the songs that I heard from her later just didn't appeal to me, and from what I could tell, it just was not the Britney that I remembered. So I checked out back in 2007. I had no idea what was going on with her. Most importantly, and what's one of the main points covered by this documentary, is that since the year 2008, Britney has been under a conservatorship. I didn't even know that word existed. I didn't even know that was a thing. Of course, if you think about it legally, it seems like a really convenient thing to have. But basically, when you are considered to be cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, is that how you say it? Is that cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs? You are assigned someone who can make legal decisions for you, like how to deal with your person and how to deal with your finances. And Britney has been under the conservatorship of her father, James Spears, since the year 2008, and still is under this conservatorship now, at the age of 39, so many years later. And that's like a big part of the documentary, whether she really needs to be under a conservatorship so many years later, how it is impacting her. Has she been sending secret messages to everyone via Instagram that she's trapped in her life? Because basically what this conservatorship means for Britney is that her father is the decides her personal as well as her business affairs. So he can like book appointments for her in terms of her work, but he can also very much control what happens in her personal life. So who she gets interviewed by, what she says during interviews, whom she can meet and not meet with. It sounds pretty drastic to me. And there is this whole like movement now, the Free Britney movement. There are fans who are like marching in front of the court every time she has a court date over this procedure, in order to let them know that according to them she seems to be pretty together at the moment and she doesn't really need to be under the conservatorship of her dad, more so because she has indicated that she does not want him to be that person to be in charge of her life. And to be honest with you, when I found out that she was under the conservatorship of her dad, I was shocked, because I didn't even know she had a dad. Because circling back to the late 90s and beginning 2000s, I was there. I was a growing teenager and Britney was my queen. Like I said, I was there when Baby One More Time hit the hit MTV. I was there for her whole rise to fame. I had a huge poster of Britney. I'm going to try to find the exact poster that I had above my desk in my bedroom to show you. And only Britney and the Backstreet Boys were allocated huge spaces of my wall. Everyone else was assigned a place on my wall, but in a much smaller format. And everyone else included Madonna. In the like mid-90s, I went through a huge Madonna phase. But Madonna, Shania Twain, Christina Aguilera, who else? I don't know if I had a poster of the NSYNC, because I was a huge Backstreet Boys girl and I didn't want to support NSYNC at the time. Whatever, irrelevant. I had a huge poster of Britney. I loved her. I used to get super excited whenever MTV had one of those like weekends when they would have full-on Britney Spears. I grew up in a different time, you guys. The only way we could watch celebrities back then or enjoy their videos was on MTV whenever MTV aired them. There was no YouTube. You couldn't just go and like replay Oops, I Did It Again 20 times because you felt like it. You either had to record it on your VHS recorder via the TV, or you had to like be glued to MTV on the days that Britney was releasing a new song, because whenever an artist released a new song of like the scope of Britney, MTV would play it every hour. So whenever Britney released a new song, me and my friends were glued to the TV rewatching it and trying to learn the dance moves and like singing along. It was a thing. So, but just to circle back to what I wanted to say about her dad, back in the 90s, I remember her talking in interviews that I read in actual magazines, because once again, it was the 90s, we had actual magazines. Whenever she talked about family, she mentioned her, or someone talked about her family, her mom was mentioned and her little sister was mentioned. I have never heard of her dad. Honestly, I thought her mom was a single mom. I had no idea that Britney had a dad. So with that in mind, you can imagine just how disturbed I was to find out that Britney had a dad. And not only does she have a dad, but he's currently in control of her whole life. The second thing I learned, well, I didn't learn that from the documentary. I learned it consequentially watching other people comment on the documentary, or like comments underneath YouTube videos. Did you guys know that that very characteristic voice in which Britney sings most of her songs, that like sort of like baby voice, which honestly always irritated me a little bit, this like yeah, you know, it's not her actual singing voice. Did you know that? I was really shocked when I found out. Apparently, I don't know whether she was made to or it was heavily suggested to her at the time that her pretending to have a little like baby voice would sell better. So she's been singing in that voice ever since, even though that is not her real voice. And that is also one of the reasons that apparently during live performances she will most often be lip syncing than actual singing, also because she dances a lot. But a lot of it comes down to the fact that her singing voice is not what is in her actual tracks. I found that a pretty disturbing finding, because when you go back and listen to, I don't know, performances of her during like the Mickey Mouse Club, like really early performances, you hear this really beautiful, powerful, deep voice, like almost like rock star voice, and then you go and hear something like Oops, I Did It Again or Baby One More Time, and you're like, what happened to your voice? That is what happens to her voice, which I think is a crying shame, because I think her original singing voice was so much better. Alrighty, let's blushy blush. So apparently she lives a very like closed off life because of her circumstances with the conservatorship, because no one is allowed. And by the way, something I found also very interesting about this documentary, Britney herself was not aware that this documentary is being made, and she does not participate or give interviews about it at all. Interviews in it, I mean. The people from the New York Times did try to reach out to her father and to her team, but because of how closed off she is, and because other people decide for her basically, and she has a very like small circle of people around her, they couldn't really get to her. The dad refused to comment on anything regarding the documentary, so Britney wasn't even aware that this documentary is being made. I think at this point, of course, she knows because everyone's talking about it, but yeah, she wasn't even aware that this documentary is being made about her. Something else very interesting that they commented on in the documentary, and I want to make brief mention of, is the situation with well, there are so many things I want to talk about in this documentary, but most of all I wanted to comment on the way that media portrayed her and the way that media like approached her during the 90s. Like everything was about basically shaming her whenever she would wear something a little bit more provocative, because the whole image of Britney in the 90s, and I guess it has to do with that baby voice she was singing in, is that she was supposed to be this like cute, innocent girl next door. She basically comes from like the Bible Belt region of the US. She comes from Kentucky, Louisiana, very religious family, so I can imagine she grew up in a very conservative environment. So of course, she used to say shit like, I will marry a virgin. Nobody in the 21st century would ever say that. But yes, back in the day, Britney did say shit like this, and people held it against her when that didn't turn out to be the case. So I went ahead and applied my lipstick off camera real quick so we can continue with the eye makeup. Like I said, I'm going to do a green look with the Juvia's Place True Right palette, and continue talking about the documentary. So as I was saying, if you watch this documentary, one of the things that will hit you the most, I think, is how disturbing the way that Britney was approached and talked about by the media, and when she was in talks with the media, how disturbing all of that was. Especially as a woman and as a young woman, someone who was basically growing up in the public eye. Some of the questions that she was getting during, and I don't know if I ever realized it at the time, for two reasons. First of all, because I have not heard a lot of these interviews. You have to realize that at the time I lived in Eastern Europe, where our access to interviews with Britney was pretty much limited to whatever they aired on MTV and whatever was in magazines, and I think a lot of these interviews were happening outside of MTV. But basically, people used to ask her like the wildest, most inappropriate things you can imagine. Like, how is it appropriate for a grown-up man, to ask an adolescent girl about her boobs? She would get questions like this about her breasts, for instance, or about her sex life, or about the existence or non-existence of such, life. And it's just so wildly disturbing to watch this right now, because I think a lot of these questions would be completely like considered so inappropriate nowadays. Nobody would dare to ask someone a question like this, or if they did, that they would be crucified for it. But apparently back in the 90s it was perfectly okay to ask an adolescent woman about her breasts on national TV and basically shame her for everything. It's really wildly disturbing to me, and it speaks volumes to how mentally stable she was at the time to be able to handle all of these questions with a smile and grace, and continue onwards for as long as she did, because this went on for a really long time. And the reason I wanted to mention it, and the reason that they mention it also, one of the reasons they mention it is in the documentary is also because of the wildly, you know, polarized ways in which Britney and Justin were handled after their split up. So I don't know, probably most of you know because it's a very infamous story, but they were together for a couple of years. They were like the golden couple of the pop star world. So they knew each other from the Mickey Mouse Club. Then he went on to become a part of NSYNC. She went on to become the absolute, you know, smashing sensation that she was in the 90s. And then they got together and the world lost its shit. Of course, so did I. We loved them. They were the golden couple. They were so cute together. Everyone was rooting for them. And then several years later, to no one's surprise, really, especially as someone now who is like 38 years old, I look back to it and I was like, they were like in their early 20s. Of course they were doomed. They broke up, and very shortly after that, Justin released his first studio album outside of NSYNC, and one of the singles of that album was the infamous Cry Me a River, where in the video a Britney lookalike, it was very heavily suggested that it's Britney because the woman was dressed like her, like it was an exact copy of an outfit that she was photographed with some years prior, and it was heavily suggested that by Justin that Britney cheated on him. And you can imagine the avalanche of comments that followed, and especially the different ways in which people approached Britney versus Justin. Of course, Justin was considered to be, oh poor guy, you know, she cheated on him, whereas people who were already looking for ways to, you know, shame Britney were in the seventh heaven. Finally, they had a really good reason to shame her, because Princess Britney cheated on poor Justin Timberlake. And I don't really know what went down there, you guys. I don't really want to comment for Justin's side or for Britney's side because I don't know what went down there. I don't exactly know what happened. And I also think that we should consider the fact that at the time, Justin was like, what, 20, 21 years old. He didn't know any better. He's a guy, they develop much later in life. I think he has matured a lot since then. And as a hurt man, someone publicly humiliated, did he really have much of a choice than to, you know, come out and do something like that? I don't know. I don't want to comment on that. I can tell you there were more gracious ways to deal with that, but he did it this way, and that's the end of story. Her reciprocation to the song, by the way, is the song Every Time, which I think is one of possibly Britney's best song. She wrote it, she sang it really beautifully, the video was really poignant, and I just love everything about that song. But that song is essentially the response to Cry Me a River, which I also thought speaks piles of Britney, because instead of like sounding bitter in that video, she was talking about reincarnation and starting over, and she was asking for forgiveness. I don't know. She was such a sweet girl. And basically after that point, people really like went after her. It was really wild how the paparazzi would follow her around everywhere, and I'm sure in the beginning she enjoyed the attention, because that's also what they said, that in the beginning she would like tip them off where she is, and she would smile for the camera, she would give them what they needed. But at some point obviously it became a bit overwhelming, because they would follow her everywhere. They would basically catch on camera every little misstep. And especially after the public humiliation with Justin, of course, things went even more south. So that was a huge part of the documentary, just the very different and unjust way that Britney was treated versus the way Justin was treated in the wake of this, you know, scandal and the separation. And one comment I wanted to make about the conservatorship, by the way, because it really struck me that she, as a woman, is under this conservatorship after having had that very logical mental breakdown when the paparazzi really pushed her to an edge that very few humans have been pushed at. I don't even know how she made it this far, quite honestly. And of course I'm not her doctor. I don't have like a direct line to her psychiatrist to tell you exactly what she suffers from, and if she really suffers from an actual psychological condition, or she was really pushed very much at that time and she responded in a very deeply psychological way. As you know, a sensitive person, as an artist, she probably takes these things even more deeply. I don't know. But what struck me is that there are plenty of dickheads in Hollywood who have behaved 10 times worse than Britney has, and I haven't heard any of them being under conservatorship. What does that tell you? It's the 21st century and we still treat women and men so differently. And the last thing I wanted to comment on is that, you know, because of this whole light being shed on the conservatorship, people have also been who are following her on Instagram, have been trying to find out whether she's not sending like cryptid messages via her Instagram, to let everyone know that she's not doing well, because at one point she disappeared. From what I understand, she has also refused to perform until her father is removed from the conservatorship, and she's been making some very disturbing videos on her Instagram account. And honestly, if you look at her, she just doesn't look like herself, you know. I think there's been like work done on her face for sure, but the way she looks, the way she acts, the way she dances, it's not even remotely the person that I remember. That's a little bit why I went on to this rabbit hole to watch performances of her before and after, and I got really bummed out because I was like, oh my god, this new person that emerged after 2008 is not even remotely the Britney that I remember from my, you know, teenage years. And it was such a bummer because we did this to her, all of us, I guess. We can take shared responsibility for what happened to her because we all reveled in her downfall. So guys, have any of you seen the documentary, and what did you think of it? Did you grow up with Britney? Did you have posters of her on your bedroom walls? Were you also extremely bummed out to find out what happened to her? Were you following her all these years? Like, I had absolutely no idea that all of these things were happening to her. I had heard a couple of her like newer songs, and because they were not my cup of tea, they had nothing to do with the Britney pre-2008, like I said, I checked out. You know, I can't imagine that courts in the US rule so many times in favor of such an arrangement if there is no like real reason for that. But at the same time, the woman has been performing like Vegas shows for the past decade. She's been touring, she's been, you know, working, creating. She seems to be a relatively functional human being, so I can't imagine why she needs to be under like what seems to be a permanent conservatorship and what's reserved for people who are really cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So I'm not really sure what's going on, but I think overall it's such a bummer because we broke this girl, and she was a treasure. She was so precious in the early 2000s and late 90s. I'm going to pop a little bit of that green now on my lower lash line, the matte one, and then a little bit of the metallic, and just finish off this look real quick. I just wanted to make one final comment about the portrayal of females in like media, because I don't know whether that's happening to you lately, but like I'm watching movies from the 90s, or I'm watching even movies from like a few years ago, and I am annoyed at the way women are portrayed in those. For instance, I was watching a movie with Jessica Biel, and for the life of me I can't remember what the name of the movie was. I think it was a remake of something from the like 80s or something, but it was a movie where she was supposed to have like a high military rank, and there were these other guys. I want to say Bradley Cooper was in it as well. And then he had a lower military rank, and he and his like troop of people had committed treason or whatever, and then they went rogue, and she wanted to stop them. Anyway, it's like completely irrelevant what the plot of the story was. But as I was watching the movie, it struck me how little contribution she has to the development of the plot. She's just there to look pretty and wave her hair, whereas her character has absolutely no contribution to the plot. The only thing she does is she's like the weak female who needs to be saved by the males. That's it. It struck me how obvious and offensive it was. And the problem is, after you see a moment like this in a movie, you cannot unsee them anymore. You start seeing them in many more movies, especially also movies that you used to love, and you get so irritated at the way women are portrayed in media. It's the 21st century, you guys. And I don't consider myself like a wild feminist or something, but I'm also very much opposed to the idea of women being housewives and incapable of doing things that men are capable of. Yes, we're very different, our psyches are very different, but women are very capable humans. So guys, this is pretty much the final look. I just want to add the tiny little touch of the heavy metal glitter liner. Let me shake it up a bit because it hasn't been used in a while, so it needs a really good shaking beforehand. I'm going to pop it right here as a little accent, because I just think it looks super cute like that. So guys, this is the final look. I hope you enjoyed this little chatty Shop My Stash video. Let me know what your thoughts are. I don't really have much more to add to the story right now. I know it was a little bit discombobulated and incoherent, but I was just kind of like stream consciousness talking about my thoughts on this topic, because I felt very strongly about it. I really enjoyed Britney's music, and I really admired her back in the 90s. She was one of my, you know, she was one of the most popular people in my formative years, so of course I care what happened to her, and I was really bummed out to see how her life turned out. I don't think it was a very happy life, and definitely not what she had envisioned for herself, probably, or anyone. Anyway, I'm going to close off this rambling. Thank you so much for watching. As usual, if you would like to see more of my face, then don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!